So last week we started a series called Family Tree, and it's all about growing together as God's family. The reason we're doing this series now during the Holy 50 Days in the Orthodox Church is because I believe that the resurrection of Christ is that which really draws us together. Okay, it's the resurrection of Jesus, the risen Christ himself, who's in our midst, who establishes for us what a true community should look like. Last week we spoke about the importance of having a sense of commitment to each other in order to build family. And today what we'll be discussing is how we strengthen that sense of community by honesty, or we're going to be talking more specifically about transparency and communication. One of our big challenges when we talk about communication is, I believe, communication is a learned behavior. And some of us have adopted some really interesting communication habits, okay, based on things that has been modeled for us growing up, either at home or church, our friendships, or probably a combination of. Just to make the point of how communication is a learned behavior, I want to give you a typical example of a story of a boy leaving his house. Okay? The boy comes to his mother and he says, "Mom, I'm going out." American mother says, "See you later." French mom says, "Au revoir." Spanish speaking mother says, "Adios." British mother says, "Goodbye." What does the Egyptian mother says?
Where are you going?
Out? Where are you going? Who are you going with? Huh? What time will you be back? Who's going to drop you off? Who's going to pick you up? Whose phone number? Who are the parents?
That's American mother too.
Is this a house or a hotel? House or hotel? Same? Clearly you've maybe learned it. Oh, no time for your parents? What about your study? Only going out? Yes. You're going to fail. You want me to die? When I die, then you'll learn. This is very interesting. Every Egyptian mother that I know uses the same 12 lines, which says to me one of two things. Either they're all on a phone call conspiring and they have some kind of like a group chat where they like share with each other exactly the 12 lines, or they're in some kind of factory that like it pumps them out and they just learn these 12 things, or these are things that moms have learned from their moms and they just kind of recycle them, okay? Some of them are obviously shared, as we heard, between cultures, but we have some very special ones, especially the "when I die, then you'll know." That's yes, that's a yes. Okay? Communication, just like many other things in family relationships, those things, there are some learned patterns that we have. And so when we speak today about the idea of strengthening the sense of family with honesty, we're going to talk about the biblical concept of transparency, of speaking truth, but in love. And we want to look specifically at the early church and see, as the church was growing, the sense of community that they had and some of the challenges that they had, some of the risks that we run, some of them that y'all have already said during our discussion section. As the early church grew, we find in Acts chapter 2, verse 41 and 42, it says, "Those who gladly received his word were baptized, and that day about 3,000 souls were added to them." So you have this community on the day of Pentecost start ballooning or blossoming. And they continued steadfastly in the apostles' doctrine and fellowship, and in the breaking of bread and in prayer. So the community was there. They were spending time together, right? And in that fellowship, like it wasn't, when we say they were breaking bread and in prayers, we see that they were in Eucharist, right? They were sharing Eucharist. They were spending time praying. Apostles' doctrine, there was some teaching going on, okay? But community life is not just sitting in a class and receiving some instruction about the doctrine. It's not just spending time in prayer and in Eucharist, although we would say that that is the central aspect of our community life. But there was a sense of fellowship. They had shared time together where there was some spiritual encouragement that was going on in that time that they spent together. What did that look like? What did that look like? If they were in this community trying to establish a sense of true friendship, we would ask ourselves, what is the most important quality in nourishing friendship? And if you run a Google search, you'll usually find one of two things right at the top of the list. Those two things are loyalty and honesty. Loyalty and honesty. If you remember being back in high school, people would say, what's the number one most important quality in a friendship? It was always one of those two, loyalty and honesty. And then when we got older, it changed. We just sometimes don't speak that, okay? If you say that you want to be in a marriage relationship, I think it's pretty important for my wife and I to have a sense of loyalty and honesty between us, yes? And in community or in family, and when my children in particular, when we will have a conversation, I'll ask them something, they've done something wrong, and I ask them, and if they tell me a lie, I tell them, listen, like the number one rule in this house is we have to have a sense of honesty amongst ourselves. We have to speak the truth, okay? Because without a sense of honesty, you can't have a real sense of community. Okay? Whenever I can't trust what's being said by the other person, I put up walls. Okay? And so today we want to speak really about the importance of communication, but very much so the concept of honesty. How do we build all that we've discussed about during the discussion section about having a strong sense of family and community and fellowship and love and being vulnerable and all that kind of stuff? I believe it comes through having healthy pattern of honesty in our relationships. If we spoke last week about the importance of being part of this family tree and being committed to the tree, today we're going to talk about transparency, if you will, as being the source of sunlight to the family tree, which without light, without honesty, without being in the light, the tree would die. Okay? If you have a tree, there's certain ingredients we're going to need for that tree to grow. The three main ingredients it's going to need to undergo the process of photosynthesis and then be able to grow up is sunlight, water, and carbon dioxide, right? Those are the three things that any tree needs. Today we're talking about the sunlight, okay? The sunlight, the honesty, the transparency within community is, I think, a foundational, very important aspect of the community, of the family, of the church, of friendships, growing up and becoming stronger. In Ephesians chapter 4, verse 15 and 16, St. Paul gives us a few very important principles here. He says, speaking the truth in love, we may grow up in all things into him who is the head. Okay? So if Christ is the head of the church, he is the actual tree, and we are vines or branches on the tree. The way that tree grows up is by speaking the truth in love, so that we may grow up in all things into him, into Christ, from whom the whole body joined and knitted together by what every joint supplies, according to the effective working by which every part does its share, causes growth of the body for the edifying of itself in love. Okay? So the growth we see a couple of times here. There's other images of growth here, of everything doing its part. All of it is predicated on speaking truth in love. Speaking truth in love. If I don't have your best interests in mind, I'm not going to speak the truth in love to you. I'm gonna deceive you every time I have a chance. Okay? And also on the flip side, if I don't trust that there can be a sense of vulnerability between us, then I may feel like if I speak something in love, it may upset you. Now, there are some important ways that this is two-sided, right? In any relationship, in any Like communication, there's the giver and the receiver. The giver has to be sensitive in communicating. The receiver has to have the humility to receive. Okay? And then there's a flipping of roles, a giving and a receiving. Because in any sense of communication, there's always a give and take. Okay? Except if there's a lecture, and I know after the lecture is over, after the message is over, there's going to be some follow-up discussion. You guys are going to come up and someone's going to say, I like that, I didn't like that. Could you clarify this? There's going to be some discussion afterwards, okay? Usually that's how any kind of relationship exists. But typically, in, I would say 99.99% of our relationships, there's a more balanced give and take, okay? And so the most important quality, I would say, in communication is just this, speaking the truth in love. Some people love speaking truth. Love speaking truth. But they forget about that second part. They say, I was just being honest. Or they'll say things like, you know, not to be rude, but, and then what's about to come out? Something real rude. They're like, I was just being honest. I don't know why they got upset. It's because you were rude about it, right? It's not about speaking truth. It's about speaking truth in love, okay? With all due respect, which means what's going to come next? Something very disrespectful, right? So it's not just about speaking truth, but it's speaking truth in love in order that we could cause the growth of the body for the edifying of itself in love. If indeed, as some of y'all said during the discussion section, there's a true sense of love in any kind of family dynamic, whether it's the church community, it's the family of origin, it's the family outside of, like at the workplace, wherever it may be. If that's the case, then we would say we want to speak truth in love so that we could cause growth to happen. One of our 4 core values here at St. Yanis is transparency. And if I had to define transparency in light of this, I would say transparency is communicating truth in love for the cause of growth. Transparency is communicating truth and love for the intentions of growth. So, for instance, when we have like family night or vision night or whatever we call it, when we have that gathering and we would do a transparent presentation of the church financials and the ministry, the reason we do that is we want to speak the truth. We want to say, this is what the church is doing so that we can grow together as a family, because then it fosters a sense of trust between the church community. Communication, in a sense, is the heart of family life. Okay? I cannot have a real sense of family if I'm not spending time communicating with another person. If I'm not investing into a relationship, communicating with others, it's not about tasks, right? It's like oftentimes churches or families get very much program or task focused. And I've read a number of books that say churches describing themselves as being about people over programs. Okay? And I think any church or any family life should be about the people, not just about the tasks. Sure, things got to get done. Okay? But how we communicate with each other, I think, is the heart of the family life. What exactly is communication? They're verbal and nonverbal exchanges in our own unique ways. Okay? So it's about the things that we say and it's about the things that we do. But every one of us has our own unique ways of expressing them. So as I indicated earlier, there's a difference between adios and where are you going, what time you're coming back, and when I die, then you'll know, and oof, and there's a difference. It's communicating the same thing, maybe not. Okay, but there's some nuances here in how people communicate. There's some nuances. Because communication, there are some personal aspects, there are some unique things that each one of us has in how we communicate. When we communicate, there has to be or should be an honest expression of our thoughts and our emotions. And when I talk about emotions, it's not just about the feel-good emotions, but some of the negative emotions that we have as well. If you will, the love and the anger and the sadness that we have. Okay? For us to communicate love, this is what family is, where love is to be experienced. And on the flip side, sometimes it's about communicating love, but it's also about letting others know when that happened, it really upset me. I would love for nothing else than here at our church family to be able to, for two people to look each other in the eye and to be able to say, when you did that, it really upset me. It really hurt me. And the other person on the receiving end to take it with humility and love. And to embrace one another afterwards. Sometimes we have no problem expressing love, but if someone expresses anger, then we take it personally. Okay? And I don't think there can be no community without being able to express anger as well. Ephesians chapter 4, verse 26 and 7. Be angry and do not sin. Which means, when I'm angry and I communicate my anger, said it really hurt me when you did that. And do not sin means that I don't separate myself and cut myself off. Or I don't flip out and I start cursing the person out and dropping bombs on them, right? Be angry and do not sin. Sometimes people will express an anger, or they were hurt or upset about something, and then they'll cut themselves off and say, I'm done with these people. I'm done with that person. I'm never talking to that person again. Okay? But it says, be angry and do not sin. Do not let the sun go down on your wrath, nor give place to the devil. Let no corrupt word proceed out of your mouth, but what is good for necessary edification, that it may impart grace to the hearers. Think about this. When you are upset about something, and you lovingly communicate that to someone, it should be for the sake of imparting grace to the hearers, not for the sake of stomping on someone and crushing them and saying, you are a piece of dirt and you'll never amount to anything, you'll never change, and you're ugly and dumb and I can't stand you. Okay? It should be about imparting grace to the hearers. It's about being a grace giver, not about being a hammer to crush the other person. Even when angry, it should be done in love. Anyone here never gets upset? Anyone here doesn't ever get angry? All right, just making sure we're still all living in this plane, all right? Just wanted to be certain of that. It's important when we get upset about something, we communicate it lovingly to each other. And we have to also have the humility to hear it. The impact of healthy communication is that members come to know one another in a very personal way. Family members will grow and their relationships will deepen. Family life is where members have the freedom and skills to deepen their relationships with God and others. Okay? Family life is where members should have the freedom and skills to deepen their relationships with God and with others. The absence of effectively communicating love means that our relationships will stay on the surface. Yes? If we don't communicate to each other, we simply become, the family unit becomes a collection of individuals. And that's actually, in some ways, like there are things that are challenging us today, by the way. I always think it's amazing when I walk into a room and there's a room full of like 40 or 50 people. Exactly. And every single one of them is on a gadget. Okay? What's going on is there's an absence of communication between the people in the room. They might be communicating on some level with someone somewhere in the world. Okay? Might be. But oftentimes we all witness this. If there's no communication, what happens, we could all be sitting in the room and be disconnected from one another. Okay? In which case, what happens is we simply become a collection of individuals with no sharing of ideas. One of the big challenges I think that folks have today, and I don't think this is a new thing, is the challenge of expressing love, saying, I love you. I love you. Okay? You guys know who this is? Cookie Monster loved his cookies. He loved cookies more than anything else in the world. There are some people I know that they will love cookies, they'll love cars, they'll love houses, they'll love everything. But they have a very difficult time expressing love to another person. Saying, I love you to another person. Okay? This should be an effortless and pleasurable thing to say to another person, is that I love you. But for many people, it's actually very difficult to utter those three words, I love you. We even know how happy it would make the other person feel, but something inside of us prevents us from communicating that love. From the time humans are born until the day they die, we are in need of overt expressions of love. There have been studies that have been done on infant deprivation, okay, that suggest that babies who do not receive expressions of love will be unable to receive and express love during their entire lives. Okay? There is a condition called Marsmus. Marsmus is a medical condition that affects many people in all over the world. But one of the ways that it's expressed has to do with the expression of love. I'm going to read you a little quote from a book called The Family that I read. It says, many children who are not given sufficient affection, even though they may receive adequate physical care, they are given all the food, vaccines, health care, everything that they need, okay? But are not given sufficient affection, suffer from marasmus, which is a disease in which the body simply wastes away. Marasmus is prevalent amongst war victims and orphans. The cause of marasmus can be a deprivation of love. This fact makes it clear that children need to be held, cuddled, caressed, kissed, and hugged. And I would say as we mature from infancy to adulthood, we have an increased need of verbal affection and affirmation and physical expressions of love. Obviously, it needs to be done in an appropriate manner with the appropriate type of a relationship, right? So there's types of love that a husband and a wife would express to one another that would be different than a child and their parent. That would be different from two friends, okay? So the expression of love should coincide with the type of relationship and the stage of life of the persons in that relationship. I want to give you 7 quick challenges to nourishing family intimacy. Number 1 is fear. We've talked about fear already, okay? I think the biggest challenge to nourishing family intimacy or obstacles to emotional connectedness through communication is fear. Fear. The main reason family members fail to express love to one another is fear. Okay? Because what happens when we communicate? You guys, some of you already said it, we make ourselves vulnerable, right? You make yourself vulnerable, you are as if you are stripping off the battle armor. Okay? It's like someone going into battle. Like if you were to go into battle, you would not take off your shield or any of your armor, right? You wouldn't. It would be a silly thing to do. But I think it would be equally silly to walk into house, to walk into our home, to walk into family, wearing our armor and our shield. Okay? And this is exactly what happens. Why? Because we're afraid. Because when we take it off, it makes us vulnerable. Okay? Some of us have been very hurt in the past, and as a result, we put up walls. We put barriers around us to protect ourselves. Second reason, embarrassment. Embarrassment. For some folks, it's awkward to introduce new ways of communicating. Okay? For parents who have always, since the day their children were born, have said, I love you, and hug and kiss their babies? It's a very normal thing to say it as they get older. But for parents who have not done that, it can be very challenging. Okay? You might say, that's a weird thing. No, there's a sense of embarrassment. What if I do it and it's not reciprocated? Okay? And so sometimes, as a fear of embarrassment, it just won't be done. My house growing up, my parents always expressed love excessively. Okay? Every time I walked out of the house. I was walking out with my buddy Kyle one time. He was visiting my house. We were leaving. And I'm walking out the door and I said, bye, I'll see y'all later. My dad goes, what are you doing? I said, what? He goes, what are you doing? I said, oh, I'm sorry. Sorry. So I ran over to him. I said, sorry, I love you. I'll see you in a bit. Give him a big hug and ran out the door. And my friend looks at me and goes, dude, we're just going to the store and coming back in 5 minutes. All right? In my house, that was a thing. All right? It was, and in his house, it was a weird thing, okay? My house, it was weird if you didn't. For some folks, there's a sense of embarrassment. What if it's not reciprocated? Okay? What if I now try to introduce it and there's no response there? Third reason, continual chatter. And this is for some people, a defense mechanism. They're always talking, they're always doing, they're always moving. Okay? And that constant chatter keeps people from communicating on deep emotional levels. Ever been in a situation where it got quiet? And you're in a car with another person, it's just you and that person? What do? Either you start texting or you turn on the radio. Right? We need constant chatter. Why? Because what if we start getting into a deep conversation? Right? What if someone says something that moves us to a deeper emotional place? I think there's something in silence that allows us to go deeper with another person. It's for that reason the scripture tells us in the Psalms, the psalmist says, be still and know that I am God. If we want to nourish a sense of connectedness, it's not just about sitting and talking. It's about being present with another person or persons, and sometimes allowing for silence. And allowing for the conversation to go to a deeper place. Number 4 is intellectualizing feelings. Intellectualizing feelings. Y'all know this person? Okay? As soon as a tear might start coming, and then they will come up with some big intellectual explanation as to why, there was something with their tear gland, and then they'll give the formula and scientific. They'll give any explanation in order to explain away any type of feeling they might have. Emotions for these people would become math problems. They're skilled at analyzing in order to avoid expressing their innermost emotions. Okay? They'll look at a family dynamic as if, although they're part of it, they will step out of it and look down on it and analyze it and then step back in. Okay? In order to remove themselves from the formula. Or they simply become a factor of X within the formula. Number 5 is lack of time spent together. And a couple of y'all mentioned this during our discussion sections. Okay? One of the biggest challenges I think facing us as society today is the lack of time spent together. I want to read you a little quote from an article I came across. The title of the quote is, "Will the high-tech societies of the future be utterly lonely?" Listen to this quote. "Humans are inherently social, and our health suffers if we're cut off from social ties. So it's no wonder the so-called loneliness epidemic is being called a public health crisis. But as we sit on the cusp of massive technological advances, the near future could exacerbate this growing problem. One pervasive source of our loneliness is technology. While it offers an easy way to keep in contact with friends and meet new people through friendship apps, Technology's omnipresence encourages shallow conversations that can distract us from meaningful, real-life interactions. Researchers at the University of Essex found that having a phone nearby, even if we don't check it, can be detrimental to our attempts at connecting with others. Why? Because it's constantly on our mind. Okay? Happens to all of us. Our phone might be close by. It could simply be a light reflects off of it, and we think there's something going off on our phones, and we look down. Okay? I was sitting in the library the other day trying to do some work, and I made the mistake for the first half hour of putting my phone face up. And every time I'd see a light, and I'm in focus, but I would see it out of my peripheral vision. Okay? This obviously happens in our relationships with each other. Smartphones have transformed post office lines from a chance for small talk with the neighbors to an exercise in email checking, and sealed the fate of coffee shops as nothing more than places of mutual isolation. God bless Starbucks and Dunkin' Donuts who give free Wi-Fi. And technology will become more ingrained in our lives. By 2050, more than 66% of the world's population will be living in so-called smart cities. These are metropolitan areas where everything will be digitally connected. I think this is only one of the many reasons why we have lack of time spent together. I think one of the other reasons is that we have become so overly committed as people. Okay? And I am guilty as charged. The problem is, the better you get at something, the reward is more work. Right? More work. So we become so stretched out. Parents, we've got our kids in every kind of activity possible. Many of us, okay? Running around from soccer to basketball to art to dance to hymns class to Vespers to Bible study to the list goes on and on. Okay? So what it does oftentimes in our family dynamics, whether the family of origin or on our church family level, sometimes we get so bombarded with all of these other things, it just simply chisels away at the time that we spend together. Number 6, for some folks, we're simply out of touch with our emotions, with what's going on the inside. We don't want to deal with anything, any kind of feelings or anything like that. And so we just keep a safe distance. One interesting article that I was reading was describing a husband who loved his wife dearly. Loved his wife so much. And he couldn't bring himself to saying, like, he had to always give an indirect way to give her a compliment. Okay? So she made like a delicious meal, and his response was, I guess I knew what I was doing when I picked you. Okay? He couldn't simply bring himself to saying, the meal that you made today was unbelievable. It was delicious. You did a great job. Okay? It was uncomfortable. He was out of touch with what was going on between him and how he was being perceived. And number 7 is traditional cultural expectations. For those who come from other cultures, non-American cultures, this can be a challenge. Okay? And I would say even within traditional American culture, boys or young men are oftentimes shaped in such a way that we are told not to express our deep emotions. Okay? That is something for girls or women to do. All right? So these are just some of the challenges, I think, of nourishing family intimacy. Now let's wrap up here real quick with 4 ways that we can nurture quality communication and transparency in order to grow as a family. What's the most critical aspect of nurturing a healthy family? Whenever someone asks me this question, I always say, I just want to know what is the number one thing in order to build a healthy relationship in marriage. I tell them, I'll give you 2. Okay, there's always a bonus, right? Number 1 is nurture a vital, healthy relationship with Jesus Christ. Okay? Number 2, learn how to listen, ask questions, and communicate. For anyone who's ever come to me for for pre-marriage counseling, I always suggest this book. Okay? Few of you have received this recommendation from me. Okay? It's called A Lasting Promise, A Christian Guide to Fighting for Your Marriage. It's a fantastic book. The whole image of marriage is that the me and the you become an us, and within that system of us, there are things that break down or that are attacking the us, the intimacy within a marriage relationship. Okay? And the author goes through 4 key patterns that destroy oneness. And all 4 of them have to do with communication. Okay? He goes through escalation, invalidation, withdrawal avoidance, and negative interpretation. Okay? And then he juxtaposes it with how do you build healthy communication within a marriage relationship. If a couple is to nurture a good, healthy relationship, Christ has to be at the center. There's got to be good communication. The same goes for family, with kids. The same goes for church family, all of us as the children of God. There's a study that I came across. It was a 10-year study that showed the difference of happily and unhappily married couples. It said the following: for happily married couples, they talk more to each other, they convey their feelings, they convey feelings that they understand what is being said to them. Okay? They convey, listen to this again, they convey feelings that they understand what is being said. They have a wider range of subjects available to them. They preserve communication channels, keep them open, and realize the importance of nonverbal aspects of communication. Let me give you guys 4 quick points here on nurturing a healthy family communication. All right? And this has become kind of what our world today looks like. I'll be honest, like sometimes people will call and I'll be like, send it to voicemail, all right? And then they'll text me and I'll text them back. Or they'll leave a voicemail and I'll text them back, okay? In family, we can't do that. Sometimes, and let me be clear, everything doesn't require a phone call. Everything does not require a phone. I'm not suggesting delete your email, text messages, any of that stuff. I'm not suggesting that at all, okay? What I am suggesting is if you want to be intentional, if we want to be intentional about nurturing family, intimacy, it's going to require time in order to do so. Quality communication takes time. It's not necessarily a lot of time, but regularly and dedicated time. I say this sometimes to families. I'll say, it is important to have time each day. And I can see someone starting to twitch in the family. They're like, what do you mean? And they think they're like, I just don't have time. And in their mind, when I say it takes time, what do they think I'm saying? You need to sit down for 3 hours a day and sit down and have that time together. And I'm saying, I'm not talking about a large amount of time. 10, 15 minutes to start with. Of sitting together and being intentional about putting away the phones and the technology and all that stuff in order to be together. Smart families will set aside time regularly each week for focused communication. And we're not talking about a 3-hour family meeting. Might be, and listen, we have gone through cycles where in my house we've done it, and we haven't done it, we've started and stopped, and we're trying to figure out what day of the week we're going to do that and build it into our schedule together. Number 2 is quality communication involves more than just words. Okay? Most people think if they can get the right words, then they'll be understood. And as you can see, the words are only 7% of communication. Okay? 38% of it is your audio, what you're saying, the tone, rather, not what, but how you're saying it. Okay? How loud you are. What words you're emphasizing. And then the last biggest chunk, 55%, is your body language. Are your eyes bulging out? Is the neck on your side popping out when you're speaking? Are your arms flying? Are you swinging at the person? Or are you sitting calmly and peacefully? Is your body language embracing or rejecting? Right? So all these things communicate something to others. Quality communication is not just the words. That's why, as one person described it to me, the lowest form of communication is sending a text message. I know you can add emojis, and that makes everything all the better, right? But quality communication involves time, and it involves more than just words. Number 3, believe it or not, quality communication involves small talk. Okay? For some folks, and listen, we because we're busy, what happens? I'm, again, guilty as charged. Sometimes I'll pick up the phone, I'm like, hey, what's up? They're like, hey, how are you? I'm good. What's going on? What do you need? Right? What have I just done? I've created a divide. Just tell me what you need and we're done. Okay? Tell me what you need, I gotta go. Okay? If I'm working, I get it. But if we're gonna build quality communication as family members, now don't all of you start calling me up and say, Abuna, how is everything? What's going on? How's Mora? Good. How are the kids? Oh, they're great. What's going on? What's your week? I'm like, I gotta go. Okay? So there has to be a sensitivity here, especially with all of us, right? But it can't always just be get the task done. Okay? It's not about tasks, it's about people. The bottom line for some people is the goal. This is like looking at the last sentence of a long letter. I want you to imagine, I said, here is a love letter from God. And you said, let me get to the very end. Let me see the final word in the whole book. That's all I'm concerned about. Some people, the first question is, what is that bottom line? It's like watching the last 10 minutes of a movie. For some folks, the bottom line, it's like showing up, arriving at church for the last 5 minutes. Let me not make eye contact with anyone. All right? Quality communication involves small talk. It's about engaging. All right? Last but not least. As someone said, quality communication involves excellence in listening. Listening. Having a conversation with someone recently. And I could tell when they were not speaking, they weren't listening. You know how I could tell? Because every time I took a split-second break, they went like this. They were ready to speak. They weren't listening. They were waiting simply for their turn to speak. Okay? Excellence in communication requires excellence in listening. I want to read to you 2 final passages from Proverbs. Proverbs 18, verse 13. And this is the Living Bible translation. It says, what a shame, yet how stupid, to decide before knowing the facts. We've got to listen. We've got to be better listeners. Number 2, Proverbs 21:11. The wise man learns by listening. The simpleton can only learn by seeing someone punished. Okay? I would say, of all of the aspects of listening, if we were to go through all of them, if you have 5 minutes sitting with someone, but listening actively, and I think one of y'all said it, when a person feels heard, that's where growth happens. Okay? I have, let me wrap up with one final story on this. Okay? I have a dear friend of mine who's a priest from New York. People used to drive for an hour and a half to come sit with him. And they would leave feeling so connected. And I would always ask, like, what is it that he's saying to people? People would drive an hour and a half. They would sit for 3 hours, and then they would sit with him for 30 minutes and then leave. And I asked him one time, I'm like, Abuna, like, what are you saying to these people? He's like, nothing. I'm listening. I said, no, but what do you say to them after? He says, I might say like one thing to them at the very end. They'll speak for 99% of the time. I might say one thing and that's it. I might ask them a question to clarify. And what that clarifying question does is helps the other person know that I'm actually actively listening. And I can tell you people felt very connected to this man. Abuna Antonius Macarius from Queens. Dear father of mine, okay? Dear friend of mine. I think this is so important. If we are to nurture quality community, there's got to be quality communication. And listening is a very, very important part of communication. All right? I think we're up on time, so let me wrap up with that. Next week, we're going to be talking about the importance of iron sharpening iron within community. So how is it that we can challenge one another? And we're going to be looking at the practice of pruning the vine. Okay? All glory to God for every man.